Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video is going to be a maintenance video. As you know, the bulk of my videos relate to restoring classic Mustangs, as seen here behind me, but I also do regular maintenance on vehicles. So I have today a 2008 Chevy 1500 pickup with a 4.3 liter engine in it, and it needs brakes. So I ordered a set of rotors and pads from Detroit Axle off of Amazon, and I'm going to be putting those on today and taking care of the worn out brakes on this vehicle. So let me show you what I'm going to do, and let's get started. Okay, a few things before we start. You're going to need a decent jack and a jack stand for safety. I would also recommend some safety glasses, some gloves, and you're going to need a variety of tools to accomplish this task. So make sure you have plenty of all of that. So what I will do is jack this up, remove one of the wheels, get the rotor and caliper exposed, and then show you how to remove those. Along with that, I'm going to show you my way of relieving pressure or relieving fluid inside the caliper. Because once the caliper has compressed because of the pads wearing out, the caliper needs to be pushed back apart in order for the new pads to fit. So a couple ways you can do this. I'm going to show you my way, but there are two ways basically to do this. One is to compress the caliper and push the fluid back up into the reservoir, which is typically what I do. The other one is to put a hose on the bleeder valve, open it up, let the hose go down into like a bottle, compress the caliper, push the fluid out into the bottle, close the valve, and then refill the reservoir. So it's up to you how you want to do that. I'm probably going to show you the method where I compress it and push it back into the reservoir. With that in mind, you can see where the level is right now. It's just slightly below max. So whenever this is being backfilled, this may want to overfill if somebody has added fluid to this, if you're doing that method. In order to alleviate that, what I normally do is take a syringe. I have this little generic syringe right here. I remove fluid from the reservoir and put it into this bottle. And that way it doesn't run out and go all over your master cylinder. Let's get going. Alright, with the wheel off, you can see the rotor and the caliper. So the caliper has to come off and the bracket has to come off. The caliper is held on with a 19mm wrench and the bracket is held on with an 18mm wrench. Also on the rotor there's a retaining bolt here, and that, from what I can decipher, is a 30. I don't know if it's a T30, and so I have one of those in a 1/4 inch socket and ratchet. Hopefully that breaks loose without any problem. I know in some areas there's a lot of rust and that'll hold stuff up. So let me get started in taking the caliper off, and then we'll get to the rotor. Now, because I don't like to abuse my hands and hit things, I use a mallet to break things loose. So just tap on that. Sometimes this part will turn. There's that's probably another 19 right there. It's the retainer. If the bolt comes out, fine. If not, put another wrench on the inside so that you can get the bolt loose. It looks like there's no Loctite or anything on that. Side note, break both bolts loose first. Now, part of the reason that I talk about compressing the pistons and putting the fluid back into the reservoir is that sometimes the bleeder, in this case here, is very rusty. Now, I'm not saying that it would fail, but if that bleeder were to fail, then I have to change, either take the caliper off or get a new bleeder, and I'd rather not take anything apart if I don't have to. So the bolts are out, caliper comes off. I'm going to set it up on top. You don't want to hang it by the hose. Don't put any pressure on it. Let it, don't let it hang. And then I'm going to take out these pads. So I also have a screwdriver handy. Get between that. And you can see there's just a little bit of life left in these pads. I always set the pads as they came off, meaning I set this one to the outside in the same position that it would have gone on, and then the one on the inside, I also do the same thing. I set it inside. Now the reason for that, if you look at this pad, it has a big plate right here, an extra part. The outside one didn't have that. So there may be some reason why they designed these differently. So that plate goes to the inside. Also, if you have an indicator, like in this case this one, the inside one, has the scraper. And you can just see on this, it's just starting to get a little bit shiny, right? So that indicator is on the inside. So just little things to keep track of when you're doing this. Now I'm going to take this bracket off. Same thing, 18 millimeter in this case. And mallet. You could use a socket and a breaker bar and all that stuff. And it may come down to me using a ratchet and socket once I get it to a certain point. Yeah, it's not going to want to spin free. It's got Loctite on it. So get the bottom one loose as well. Now I don't know what the torque specs are on these. You can look them up online. Yeah, I'm going to have to use a ratchet to get those loose. So let me get that moving. See, these have yellow Loctite on them. I think if we get any Loctite on there, you're good, right? Again, yellow. Now this bracket, when you take it off, depending on your kit, you may or may not get these new tabs here. So the Detroit Speed kit comes with those. It isn't necessary, let's say, to replace these every time, but it may be worth it if there's buildup on these, and it may cause restrictions with the movement of the pads. So we'll set that aside. Now we're going to hope that I can get this loose. That's going to be hopefully not a problem. I put some penetrant on there, and of course I am using a small socket here, and I may have to be creative. Oh, good. Another thing you can do, and I've done this myself on this one, is I took a big punch, like a 1/4 inch punch, and I hit the surface of this to try to break loose any rust. Alright, let's see if this will come loose. Good. That came off nice and easy. So this rotor, I don't have the capability to measure the thickness of it, but it has grooving in it, and it has a ridge up on top here. It's possible you could turn this rotor. I just don't see the value in it myself. You can buy a new one for almost what it costs to have one of these turned. So that's it for removal. And of course, at this point, check your hub. If it's making any noise, which this one's not, so we're good to go there. You can clean up any of these holes. You may have some junk in there. That's some leftover Loctite, and give it a once over. Everything looks good, so I'm going to move on to the next part. And what I'll do is I'll put the rotor back on, put the screw back in, and then work on the caliper. Alright, so here's the new nice shiny rotor. Bag is sealed, and they put some oil on these so it doesn't rust when it's being shipped. So you have to take that oil off. So once we get this out of the bag, I'm going to put it on where it should fit and line up that hole right there with this retaining bolt. If you wanted to, you could put some more Loctite on there. I don't know that it's absolutely necessary. This is really meant for the assembly line, but it doesn't hurt. I'll put a little torque on that, and it's not going anywhere because not only is it tight, but the wheel is going to hold it on as well. Okay, so that's in place. Now this kit did not come with this. This came from another kit that I did. Sometimes they put these in, sometimes they don't. I don't know what the parameters are. So I'm going to take some cleaner here, and I'll rotate the rotor and remove the oil from the back side. You can see some residue there, and from the front side. So definitely some residue. And it doesn't hurt to leave some oil on the surface here, but your main thing is the contact surface for the pads. Okay, now, as I said before, I'm going to compress this caliper. And I'm going to monitor the fluid up on top. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You can buy the caliper compressor tool, which I've used many times in the past, or you can do a simple task. And let me get the camera up and use some big vice grips. So nothing wrong with either. A lot of people have vice grips, may not have the compression tool. And I'm going to gently put pressure on that. I have two pair of these. There's two pistons here, so I'm going to make sure I get it kind of an even pressure on this. I'm not in a hurry. I'm not forcing it to move. I'm being very, very slow with it and gentle. Now, some people may say this could affect the ABS system, and I'm sure that it could. But I have been doing it like this for a long time. It's up to you if you want to do it this way completely. I'm just demonstrating how I do it. So we'll get this fully compressed and get back to the reassembly process. And of course, as I'm doing this, I will monitor the fluid in the reservoir to make sure it's not pushing up past the neck. If need be, I'll take that syringe, draw fluid out, and remove it. It's moving very freely. I'm not having any issue with resistance. Yep, that one's all the way in, and that one's all the way in. You can feel it get kind of tight, so get those out of the way. Alright, another thing you can do is check your rubber boot around the piston. Make sure that it's not like bubbled up or anything. Many times if it is, you can actually take a little screwdriver and just kind of go by the edge of it, push a little bit in, and it'll let it relax and go back into place. So now I'm going to put the caliper back on, or I mean the caliper bracket back on. So it only goes one way, and there is still Loctite. I know it's not wet, but for the moment I'm just going to set this up on here and get the bottom one in place. Okay, now I'm going to demonstrate these pieces. So again, this kit comes with these little plates, new stainless steel plates. Should be 4 in here. You only need 2, obviously. And you have to take this off. It just uses these little slotted areas right here, squeeze onto this little flange down here at the bottom. So many times it'll just go on with your hand. You can squeeze it on, and it does. I'll also point out, if you look at this one, it has these little ears sticking up in the middle, right? The new one, they're bent to the side, so you'll have to push those up. What that is meant to do is, well, I say push that up, don't push on them. It's meant to push pressure on the pads. So basically, whenever this is functional and you put the pad in, it's putting pressure right here on the pad so that it creates less friction, supposedly, when you release the brakes. Don't bend those things. Let them stay down and keep some tension like that. And of course, these over time, those things just wore out. They won't retain the pad anymore. So it's just to help keep the pads away from the rotor when you're not applying the brakes. Let's see if that one just comes out. Yeah, it will. So there you can see where those little tabs are. See if I can get this to go on. Not quite. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so that's in place. Now I will go ahead and put a little bit of Loctite on these. I didn't want to bolt them down until I was sure this was all going to work. Okay, just making sure everything's fitting the way it should. I took this loose and this was able to squeeze down in a little bit further. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this. Make sure everything's fit the way it should. I'm going to put the caliper back on, or the bracket back on, and I have some Loctite here, and I will put that on the threads. I also looked up the torque. I figured y'all wanted to know what the torque was. So I looked it up, and according to what I found online, it's 148 foot-pounds. That's a lot. So I got my torque wrench out, and I set it to that spec, and we're going to torque these down. So I can, if you don't have a torque wrench, use some German torque. When you say, what's German torque? Good and tight. I mean, 148 foot-pounds is a lot. So I've got my handy-dandy Mac tools torque wrench. See if I can get in here and get on these without it being a problem. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's a lot. This one I'll have to come in at a different angle. Kind of hard to do this and film it at the same time. So let me get that one torqued, and then we'll finish up the job. Caliper bracket's bolted down, and I will point out there is a little packet of grease inside of this kit, and it has a picture on here, and it shows, I don't know how well you can see that, it shows places that it says to put grease. Now it says on this side, grease the center and edges of the back plate. So I'm assuming it's talking about the pad itself, like greasing the pad and these edges. It wouldn't hurt to do that, I guess. The other one that says is grease the sliders and holding clips. Alright, these are the sliders, and these move really nice. So I'm not even going to take those out. But normally what you would do is you can pull on this and it'll come out, and you can see it's got grease already on it. Nice grease. No reason to undo that. You clean that, grease it, put it back in, and then push it in, and the rubber boot will catch and hold it in place. Hopefully you can see that okay. Now, I normally don't do the grease on the back side or anything like that, and I'm probably not going to do it on this one. I know it says it on here. Okay. Grease the center and edges of the back plate. I'm not going to put any in there. I don't think they came like that from the factory in these pieces, so I'm not going to do it. I know, breaking the rules. Okay, so as we talked about the pads, here's the one without the extra piece, and here is the other one with the extra. So sometimes you have to angle these a little to get them in, and remember they got these little clips that are going to fight you in the process. So I'm going to angle that slightly, get it lined up, and there it is. Same way here. We have to angle it just a little bit, get the pressure points. Now you can see it's pushing that away. And that moves pretty nice. So is that. Okay. Now I'm going to put the caliper back on. Remember, don't twist the hose. You know, I have this hose, the caliper sitting up on top. So when you do this, don't twist this thing around. Keep it in the same direction that it came off, because you don't want to bind up on the hose. I'm going to compress these, push the carrier bolts in a little bit. And then run these bolts in. Again, there's no evidence of thread locker. So I'm going to get these in. And I also did a little research. These, it says they torque to 74 foot-pounds. So that's what I'm going to do. I've got my little torque wrench set to 74. Well, let me get a better angle here. It's hard to pull on this and not block the camera, as I'm doing right now. Let me try the bottom one. There. You heard it click, 74. This one has to be close. And I'm sweating. There it is. It was right at 74. When I stopped earlier. One more. Show you again. Okay. That's it, my friends. Beautiful. Now it should be good to go. Everything is where it needs to be. And at this point, what I'll say is go in the vehicle, pump the brakes, compress the fluid back into these pistons, so when you do the other side, you're not having a false reading on the level. If you're doing it the way I'm doing it, you're not having a false reading on your level in your master cylinder. You want to backfill these. Other than that, get your wheel back on, get it off the jack, and get back to driving. Man, let me tell you, it's hot in here. It's 90 degrees inside my garage. I usually have the air conditioning on, but I can't because I got the big door open. Now, if you've done all this work and you've swapped out your brake pads, there are break-in procedures online. I'm not going to tell you my techniques or anything, but you need to go out and drive it and break in those pads to the rotors. Also, verify your master cylinder has the correct amount of fluid in it, and if it doesn't, add some. If it's good, leave it alone. If you need to add some, of course, or remove some, I already showed you about using the thing. Syringe. That's what it was, syringe. I've already showed you how to use a syringe to get that fluid out of there. So anyway, thank you for watching. I want to thank my patrons for supporting me as I make these videos. I know they want to see more of the Mustang stuff, and I will be making more Mustang videos, obviously, but stuff like this pays the bills as well, so I need to take care of my friends and their vehicles. That'll be it for this video. Until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya. It's hot. Sweat equity.